Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF, in Hebrew, Anim as Bitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security-oriented policies to guide the state of Israel. We are a movement of more than 20,000 people, including many reserve officers and operators from all branches of the Israel Defense Establishment. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing and all of our previous briefings so that we can really bring you behind the headlines what is happening here in Israel. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Dan Diker, President of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and the longtime director of its Counter-Political Warfare Project. He is former Secretary General of the World Jewish Congress and a research fellow of the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. He has written 6 books exposing the apartheid anti-Semitism phenomena in North America and has authored studies on Iran's race for regional supremacy and Israel's need for defensible borders. Dan, is a great privilege to have you with me today.
Moshe, thank you for having me on the program. It's a privilege.
Absolutely. We had a brief interview with you the other week at the IDSF Security Summit. We shared that with our viewers, and we decided we need to bring you back for more time. There is so much to discuss, so much to learn for you. But let's start with something really that was in the headlines today, that the Prime Minister announced that 75% of Hamas has been destroyed in Gaza. 18 of the 24 battalions have been destroyed. But at the same time, we're now hearing that fighting is starting back up in northern Gaza. And likewise, the Lebanese newspapers reported today that Hezbollah is soon to stop attacking Israel. But at the same time, the IDF spokesperson just a few days ago warned Hezbollah that an attack from Israel is potentially coming very soon. So which is it? Are we on the verge of escalation in this war, or do you think things are quieting down?
I think we're both on the verge of escalation, and we are on the verge also of things quieting down at the same time. I know it's an equivocation of an answer, but in the Middle East, Moshe, as you know, everything is a surprise and nothing's a surprise, and we don't know from moment to moment the number of variables that actually shift. As we discussed at the IDSF, the Bitchonistim Security Conference last week, which was an extraordinarily successful event and the first major security conference since the October 7th atrocities, we discussed there that the head of the octopus, which is the Iranian regime in Tehran, and by the way, I'd like to share with the viewers that our Persian analysts that cover the Persian language media, they actually translated everything that happened in the session that we led at the IDSF Security Conference into Persian, into Farsi, and it was distributed by the IRGC communications network Kavosh. So the Iranian regime is following the IDSF. They're following the octopus framework that we have created. As we move forward in this very serious Iranian-Israeli war. That is the war we are in. We are in the second Iranian regime-Israel war, the first one being in 2006 that took place over our northern border in Lebanon. And this is the second Iranian-Israeli war that opened up to our south in Gaza, but it very much is an Iranian war opposite Israel, and it actually is a continuation of the dedication and the commitment of the IRGC and the Ayatollahs to destroy the one and only Jewish and democratic state. So we know that we're fighting the Iranian regime, and that's why we may well see an escalation in the north, because there's no way that 80 to 100,000 Israeli citizens, men, women, and children, can return to their homes in northern Israel until the Iran-backed Hezbollah has been really pushed way back north of the Litani River, which is at least 20 kilometers, or that this terrible rocket threat and missile threat from Lebanon is neutralized, Moshe. Many people don't realize that the Hezbollah, at the supply and instruction of their Iranian paymasters, have over 150,000 rockets pointed at every a geographical point in Israel. It's a very serious problem. So that may demand an escalation by Israel.
Dan, let me ask you. So the war we're in right now, you don't describe it, you don't define it as a war between Israel and Hamas. It's a war between Israel and Iran. If you were speaking right now to the State Department in the US or the administration, would they agree with you that this is the Israel-Iran war of 2024?
Moshe, it's a very good question. I think they may well agree, but they see the solution is different than Israel sees it. Israel sees the Iranian regime as the problem, not part of the solution. And I mean, I think what we're all seeing, and it's being reported in the media, and it's even more detailed, be under the radar, behind the media, is this fundamentally different view that Israeli military planners and the Israeli government leaders see for how to attack this Iranian octopus and its Hamas tentacles and its Hezbollah tentacles, as well as its tentacles in Judea and Samaria, which is in the tentacles of the Hamas in Judea and Samaria, otherwise known in common parlance as the former West Bank of Jordan, as well as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, as well as in Judea and Samaria. So we have the tentacles of the Iranian octopus have basically trying to strangle Israel from three different directions. And these decisions that are made by the proxies of the Iranian regime are decided in Tehran. We know that Tehran was behind the planning, execution, supply, and financing of the October 7th atrocities, and they were, for the year before, very much behind the metastasizing terror attacks in Judea and Samaria. So, and they also, by the way, are masterminding the deception warfare, because the Iranian regime wanted us to believe that they were, I would say, moderating in Gaza, as they are the de facto sovereign in Gaza since 2007. We were led to believe, and we Israel military planners and government leaders made a mistake in thinking that the Hamas was seeking greater international legitimacy via the West NATO ally in Turkey, where Turkey became the command center, as well as Beirut. There was a two-country command center with the Hezbollah and Hamas in Beirut, in the Dahiya neighborhood of Beirut, Dahiya, as well as in Turkey. We know that that there is a Hamas command center in Turkey. So we were led to believe, and we allowed ourselves to believe, that the real problem with the Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad led us to watch their terror actions in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, and we took our eye off the ball. And look what happened on October 7th. All of this is an Iranian operation. Israel sees the solution to this in not only cutting off the tentacles of the Iranian octopus, but actually getting to the Iranian regime itself. The Iranian regime in Tehran does not want a direct confrontation with Israel and with the United States, and that is why they have done a superb job, I must say, in mobilizing all the tentacles of its proxy forces and keeping itself, out of direct confrontation. But this remains to be seen. What's going to happen now with the United States and Great Britain having bombed the Iran's Houthi proxies in the Red Sea, because the Red Sea now is really being shut down to a lot of international commerce and shipping, which is of great concern to the United States. The United States, however, to end this answer, is saying that the response, the solution to this is to stop the fighting in Gaza, because they see Israel's continued fighting in Gaza, which every Israeli believes is absolutely necessary to cut off that tentacle of Iran, of the Iranian regime, and really show from a perception standpoint that the Iranian regime can be weakened and even fatally weakened by an overwhelming victory of its Hamas proxy. The United States sees it differently. They see that continued fighting against Sinwar and the Hamas death cult in Gaza will lead to a greater regional conflict, when in fact, Moshe, I think you and I know, and many of the viewers on this call know, and listeners on this call know, that Iran has inflamed a regional tension and is attacking in a regional sense against Israel. It is not the opposite. It is not the other way around. So Israeli military and governmental leaders know that we have right now a major challenge with our U.S. Allies, who, by the way, President Biden has been a great friend of Israel, has been a great supplier of Israel, a great supporter of Israel, but we have a major policy difference here over how to continue to prosecute this war against the Iranian regime and its tentacles.
So if that is the case, then 4 months into this war, Israel has not struck the real enemy yet, and we're getting bogged down in Gaza, and Iran remains 100% intact. How are we going to shift the focus of our defense or our offense to Iran?
Well, the first point is that Israel needs an overwhelming victory in Gaza. That actually will puncture the Iranian regime in Tehran, because the echo effect of an overwhelming victory, and that is a no tolerance policy for compromise in Gaza. That means the total destruction of the Hamas governmental and military terror infrastructure and leadership. It cannot allow even the assessed 1,000 remaining rockets, which is a fraction of what the Hamas held in the beginning of this war. There cannot be one rocket left in Gaza to fire at Israel in order for the perception warfare that is taking place as we speak to allow the perception of Iran, Hamas to emerge victorious. If Israel continues what the Prime Minister Netanyahu has said has been the continuation of war to victory, then that will send a very important message to the mullahs in Iran, as well as to Israel's emerging allies and partners in the Arab world. Everyone is waiting and watching to see if Israel will emerge victorious, and if it does, the Hezbollah will also they will take heed at what that could mean for Lebanon. The Hezbollah certainly, which is, the Hezbollah is not, in a way, is very similar to Hamas in the sense that it has deep control in Lebanese territory by being in the government, by having a blocking third in the Lebanese parliament. So Hezbollah, like Hamas, is a controlling faction in the government as well as in the parliament. And it does not want to lose its country. And I think it's become very clear to many in Israel that if Israel escalates, there's going to be an assertion of power projection and destruction of Hezbollah that they probably have not imagined in the past.
There's a lot of discussion right now about the day after in Gaza and many different plans being presented, no clarity necessarily on what the best option. I'm curious to know two things. Number one, what do you think the best option is for the day after in Gaza? And number two, do the day after scenarios impact the issue with Iran? Meaning, once Hamas is destroyed in Gaza, and let's take that for a given it will happen for the purpose of this conversation, is that enough to then move on to the next points with Iran, or is the day after scenario very critical to the messaging to Iran? But first, what is your best day after scenario?
Well, that I wish you wouldn't ask such difficult questions, because then it can be an easier conversation. But you have asked the key question, and I must say that the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, together with our partners, the IDSF, we co-authored a working paper that can be found online called Rehabilitating Gaza, the day after Hamas. And this is a very, very difficult question. It was a very difficult monograph to author because we had to make all kinds of assumptions. And, one of the key difficulties, Moshe, as you know very well as an analyst and a communication specialist in the Middle East, is that it's very difficult to project or foresee what really will be what we call the day after. We mean the day after Hamas's demise, governmental demise, political demise, and military terror demise. And at this particular moment, it's very difficult to know when that will be, how that will look, and what will come after. One thing that I think is very important to share with our many hundreds, if not thousands, of listeners right now and viewers is that it is very, very complex and nuanced to assess how it will be for a non-Iran related, non-Hamas affiliated, non-PLO, non-PA affiliated governmental power to come in and govern Gaza. Even if you go from municipality to municipality, we know there are basically 5 major municipalities of Gaza, from the north to the center to the south. And it's a big challenge here, because from a perceptual point of view, any non-Hamas, non-PLO, non-PA, non-Iranian affiliated power knows that it takes a major risk to itself, to their own lives, to come in and govern after an Israeli victory. However, and this comes back to our original discussion 10 minutes ago. If Israel prosecutes a war that ends in overwhelming victory and destruction of Hamas, it will enable local forces to come in and say, we will cooperate with the victorious power, with Israel, especially if Israel shows goodwill and creates international governing body over UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which, as we know and has been reported in the past days, has basically become a forward base for the Iranian regime. Not at all a refugee relief agency, but a political agency that as has been said in recent days, is basically demanding a continuation of the 1948 war of extinction, with the intention of extinguishing and undermining Israel. That's what UNRWA has been, and Israel has the opportunity now to take control of UNRWA, because Israel is quickly becoming the de facto sovereign in Gaza for the meantime, or the administrator of Gaza. And we at the JCPA have suggested, and we have met with policymakers, members of Knesset, particularly Sharon Heskel, who is the head of the Forum to Reform UNRWA, an international governing body to oversee the hundreds of millions of dollars of UNRWA dollars that should go to the public in Gaza, as opposed to going to the Hamas. 60% of that money right now goes to Hamas, terror, the terror network in Gaza, and that is intolerable. And Israel has the possibility now of directing that humanitarian aid directly.
So the 2005 disengagement from Gaza failed. Is there any model of success for Gaza without Jewish resettlement, so to speak? Meaning that we know Judean Samaria is safer because of the Jewish towns and cities. We speak a lot about that in our briefings. Is there a model for success in Gaza without Jewish presence there?
Well, that's a very tough question, because I'll just go back to Moshe Dayan, our foreign minister back in post 1967 war, said that Israel's legitimacy to protect areas outside the 1967 lines come when there's Israelis to protect. That civilian settlements, civilian communities actually create on the ground the legitimacy for the Israeli Defense Forces to be in those areas. So your question, which is a very, very important question, is, well, in the case that Israel does not annex Gaza, even though there is discussion in Israel, there is a difference of opinion within the public discourse in Israel as to whether Israel should go back and reestablish Gush Katif, which had been a 3-generation communities in Israel of about 9,500 people. And if it does not do that, what legitimacy does Israel have to remain for an extended period in Gaza, having overall security responsibility and authority in Gaza? And I think the answer is that in the same way that Israel has security responsibility ultimately throughout Judea and Samaria, even in Area A, as a function of the Oslo Accords of 1993-1995, in which Israel has the right, according to a signed international agreement, the right of hot pursuit to chase terrorists. That is exactly the same type of right that it reserves itself in what we call post-Hamas Gaza, because no country in the world would ever allow itself to get into a situation where just several kilometers from its southern border, you have a jihadi organization with thousands of highly trained, highly weaponized, and highly supplied and jihadistic, soldiers. There's just no country in the world would allow itself to be in the situation that Israel is in. And the mass murder that took place in the Western Negev is simply unprecedented in modern political history in terms of its numbers, in terms of its barbarism, and therefore what's very important, Moshe, is that Israel constantly remind the Western world as to what happened on October the 7th, in terms not only in terms of 12 to 1,300 people, which is tantamount to 35,000 Americans being murdered in one day. That's, what is that, three and a half 9/11s, with a force multiplier barbarism the world hasn't seen. That's a very important perceptual reminder that Israel must issue every day as to why it has to maintain security responsibility overall for Gaza, while allowing and wanting Gazans to create its own future. And there are, by the way, indications. Professor Daniel Pipes said yesterday at the JCPA briefing that we also have every day before at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Yours is 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That in fact, polling is indicating that there is a public sentiment in Gaza for life after the Hamas, life that could provide themselves with a real a future of prosperity, of security, of stability. I have questions because of the massive public support for Hamas. They voted Hamas in. They also contributed and took part in the massacres and the torture and the mass rape of October the 7th. And they also were they acted in a barbarian way when these young women and children and civilians were brought back into Gaza. But having said that, there are some indications that there can be a positive future for Gaza. But it all really depends, Moshe, on Israel having an overwhelming victory over the Hamas. There cannot be a compromise on that point. Unfortunately, I think all the viewers in the program, you and I, all of us know that there is a major policy difference between us and the United States and our leading European allies in the UK, Germany, France, and other countries on this point.
For sure, I want to push back on one issue because I really want to hear your thoughts on it. When you're comparing Gaza to potentially the Oslo area A, B, and C, and looking at Gaza as being one big area A in the future, but in Judea and Samaria, area A only works, so to speak, because you have B and C there. That if the IDF needs to enter into Jenin or needs to enter an area of area A, they have that operational capacity because of the freedom of movement that B and C provides. So if you have Gaza, that's all, so to speak, in area A, would that work? Can the IDF operate like that?
Well, it's only a question of border penetration. In other words, what we're seeing is a Gaza that is not a sovereign state, even though it was a de facto Hamas-stan. It was de facto sovereign state, but Israel's going to have operational, we can enter in from any of the crossings. And I think there's going to be a whole new level of human intelligence that we actually conceded when we pulled out of, Israel pulled out of Gaza lock, stock, and barrel in 2005. We lost a lot of our human intelligence capacity. We over-relied on OSINT and technical intelligence capacity. But I think that, there is no buffer zone between Gaza and Israel. I mean, we simply saw that Israel does not have defensible borders in the south. We don't have defensible borders in the south. We don't have the necessary buffer that has to now be created through all kinds of physical barriers and other means, so that Israel is going to take the privilege of overall hot pursuit whenever, preventative hot pursuit whenever it sees it deems itself necessary. You're very right about areas B and C. Obviously, in the Judea and Samaria, 60% of Judea and Samaria is under full Israeli administrative and security control, and that is why, by the way, that the 100,000 or so Palestinian Arabs that live in Area C very much want to have Israeli citizenship, because they really know where their future is, their future lies, and it is not with the Palestinian Authority in their view.
Dan, we have 5 minutes left, so I'll ask you a simple question. What do you think the red lines are for a hostage deal for Israel to enter into?
Well, again, there is something here brewing, that Israel demands an entire hostage deal. There cannot be. Yossi Cohen, former Mossad director, made this point in the Israeli papers this morning. You cannot have, from Israel's point of view, any sort of staged or partial deal. It has to be one deal, all the hostages for whatever Israel agrees to in releasing convicted terrorists, if they're prepared to do that. There is tremendous political pressure coming from Israel's Western allies to do that, particularly the United States. And one red line, Moshe, is that Israel cannot be asked to pull back or to stop its military positions in Gaza, but merely agree to a pause in order for these hostages to be released and come home. And God willing, there are many more alive than Israel assesses there are among the 132 to 136 hostages. And clearly, I think it should be stated clearly that it is not a demand. It has never been a demand of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that Israel create a Palestinian state in order to normalize relations with Israel as part of this whole grand bargain, which is why, which is what we're talking about. I mean, what is on the table now that people must understand is a very high risk grand bargain that includes this hostage deal, normalization with Saudi Arabia, which looks like the American carrot, in exchange for what Hamas wants is a total cessation of the war. In my estimation, Israel will not agree to a cessation of the war. If Israel ceases the war, it loses. It loses, and then many more lives are at risk because Israel will perceive to be also perceptually, also physically, the loser in this ongoing war, which right now, as we speak, the Hamas is determining the perceptual advance of this war in terms of certainly of the hostage deal and all around. So Israel is going to have to keep its nose to the grindstone and win this and call on its friends in the West to allow it to win this war of terror that was brought upon it by the Iranian regime, executed by the Hamas and Hezbollah. And Israel is going to have to take a no tolerance approach and win this war big time.
Dr. Dan Diker from the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for sharing all of this. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, for another briefing. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, take care, everyone.
Thank you ever so much, and thank you to all the viewers and listeners, too.